Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder aboard the XM8. And this is a really weird tank to describe. First of all, how can you get your hands on this tank? Well, in the current crafting event, it's one of the two main prizes, and this is in competition with the German F4F Early Phantom. And to be honest, I think that this tank is not really worth it that much. If you pay for it on the marketplace, be advised that I personally wouldn't spend more than 20, at best 30 Gaijin coins for it, because it's an event reward vehicle, not a premium. Also, to be honest, the Americans, where this tank sits in, don't really need reward vehicles. They have plenty of tanks in the tech tree, but let me just talk you through the right hand side of the tech tree with the reward tanks. We have the Merkava Mark 1, we have the Merkava Mark 2B, we have the Merkava Mark 3D, we have the M60 and BT, we have the Squadron Activity Reward Tank, the M901, and we have the XM1 as a premium. They are all in the region of the battle rating of this tank. And also in the tech tree, this thing has to sell its value versus the M1128 Striker and the MET70, and they either have a lower battle rating or better performance, or well, both. And the tank doesn't really convince me either way. So it's a really weird tank to describe. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm not saying it's unusable, and it definitely has its moments with the ability to scout and also a 5-second reload. But if I want even faster reload, there is the HSTVL at the 9.7. And if I want to go faster, because this tank has some really weird problems with its mobility, that tank fails to really impress me. I can make it work, but it's definitely not outstanding. It's not thrilling. It's not fun. And if you think about the average map in War Thunder, mobility and maneuverability are key. This tank comes in two flavors, with the armor package that you kind of see me here using versus here some Soviet tanks, and it seems like I'm bouncing stuff. But that comes at a price, because without the armor package, which is level 3 as it is called, I have a 17.6 ton tank accelerated by a 550 horsepower strong engine to a top speed of 72 kilometers per hour, and in reverse around 14 kilometers per hour. And even then it feels slow, despite having a whopping 31.3 horsepower strong engine. And in this configuration that you see me using here, well, the tank weighs, because of the additional 6 tons of the armor package, 23.6 tons, and has a horsepower to ton ratio of then 23.3 horsepower per ton. And then the tracks are narrow, and especially with the added weight, it seems like you lose all acceleration. You're not really slow in terms of, let's say, the comparison of a T-34 versus a Churchill, but versus top tier, think about the MBT-70, think about the XM1. I have some gameplay examples in just a minute. And even with the armor package, it seems like I bounced a lot of the shells at the start, right? I'm quite convinced that this guy that shot me just hit the outside of my turret, where I would not really have received a shell in the first place, because the armor package extends quite significantly. Now watch this. This is the combination of weak armor and a 5-second autoloader. Just when I'm about to kill him, he kills my gunner with the heavy machine gun, despite having the armor package, because the turret front isn't really protected, and that is an aluminium alloy. It can't resist a 50 cal, right? So now let's have a look at what the tank can do without the armor package, how quick it is in direct comparison to an XM1 that is behind me and is moving, and I try to stay on the road to maximize the grip, the traction that I have, right? And I try to drive here as efficiently as possible. So it doesn't really look slow, but when you drive this tank, at some point it just doesn't accelerate anymore. It just keeps its speed. And an XM1 This is that. There you have the example. And you can see this being a constant thing. Now, you would say, okay, it's a light tank, so it can scout, right? One final thing, by the way, if you choose to pick up the armor package, you also lose your smoke launchers. That one thing I have to add hastily. So, it's a support tank. It's a bit more like a tank destroyer, and the 5-second reload makes it a good, support tank. Well, in theory, but then look at the usual maps, and yeah, that ammo didn't go off. I don't know why. It's just my luck, right? Now, anyway, as a support tank, I would say it doesn't really cut it, and that comes down to the ammunition. And, well, what do we have here? Again, if you get this tank, it's stock, so you have to use the M456 heat FS round. 400 millimeters of penetration, roughly 1173 meters per second muzzle velocity. It does the job, but a lot of tanks have composite armor and Euro protection, yada yada yada. Tier 1, you have the choice between the M416 smoke shell or the M735 APF SDS. And this is where you have to make a second look at the armor penetration values. It has a muzzle velocity of 1501 meters per second with a base penetration of 353 millimeters versus 0 angles of attack and 166 millimeters of penetration at 60 degrees of attack. And as a tier 4 upgrade, after the usual hash, which not that many people sadly use these days, you get the C76A1 APF SDS with 334 millimeters and 193 millimeters at 60 degrees angles of attack with roughly the same muzzle velocity. So at first that looks worse because it's lacking roughly 20 millimeters of penetration, but therefore it has roughly 30 millimeters more penetration at 60 degrees angles of attack, which is more interesting versus sloped armor and obviously composite armor. Now, the problem is, yes, it has an autoloader, but it hasn't really helped me. You know what also has an autoloader and has that shell as the tier 1 upgrade? Right, the M1128 Striker, which sits at 9.0, is a wheeled tank destroyer and, well, also has an autoloader with 7.5 second reload. Yeah, that's 50% more, but it works better at long range as a support and has better thermal imaging, because the XM8 has what looks like first generation really grisly thermal imaging and only for the gunner, not for the commander. Whereas, the M1128 Striker has some of the finest thermal imaging you can imagine for the commander as well, if I'm not mistaken. And as a tier 4 upgrade, it has the M900, which has a whopping 522 millimeters of penetration at 0 degrees of attack, and also at 60 degrees angles of attack, 302 millimeter. That is over 100 millimeters more, over 50% more of penetration for roughly the same muzzle velocity. So the XM8 is not really convincing in terms of speed when it comes to a light tank. It has even worse survivability because of the 3-man crew and the stand-up ready rack with 21 rounds in between and overall 30 rounds of shell capacity, so it's really limited in that aspect as well. The tank fails to really make a point. It feels out of touch. It's not bad and it's not unusable, but it's not making a point. It's not something where I could say, wow, this is a really amazing tank, because it's not fast enough. It has really bad survivability. And either way, the mobility, well, as I just said, sucks. And the gun is also okay. I'm spoiled by so many other tanks that are around it just performing so much better. It's a bit of a pointless tank. I'm not ranting here, I'm just not seeing the point for the tank. Again, it's not a bad tank. It can kill stuff. Again, when you think about selling it or buying it, it's a non-premium tank that you get stock that is just too slow for a light tank, and also that high tier maps are mostly city fights, and in that aspect the tank really doesn't shine. Yes, it has the usual pretty okayish gun handling, 10 degrees of gun depression, 20 degrees of gun elevation, over 40 degrees per second turret rotation speed. But then there's also some weird aspect when it comes to the stabilizer, where it has quote unquote only 11 degrees per second gun elevation. So if you go over rough terrain, because those tracks are really narrow and they are pretty bouncy on everything that you hit, they let the tank rock rather violently compared to a wider, more stable weapons platform like the XM1, for instance. And then the tank's gun can rock up and downwards more than what the stabilizer can hold, and then you're all of a sudden out of the region of the stabilizer, which is really, really awkward. So, to be honest, this tank is okay. There are two sides to look at it. First of all, it's not really that outstanding. It's not really that good in my experience. It's not unusable and definitely has its moments. It's nice to have another light tank, but it fails in the light tank department, fails to really impress in the support role, as you know, this tank has also no artillery strike. And with the level 3 battle pack or battle armor package, whatever you want to call it, it's just getting even lower. It's really awkward to drive. Looking at the footage, I realize it doesn't really look like this, but yeah, it does the job, but that's as much good thing as I can talk about this thing. Anyway, make up your own mind. Let me know in the comment section down below. And as usual, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video and you found it informative. If so, why not give it a like? Subscribe if you want to see more. And we'll see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.